So I've already had a chance to max level the first weekend of the beta. Level 20 is the level cap just to start off. I want to give my first initial impressions. For starters, we're going to start off some of the good things. We'll kind of speed through some of those and we'll spend a little bit more time on some of the negatives to kind of explain on maybe some resolutions to those. Because if it's good, then I don't really need to suggest any changes. And then if it's something that maybe I don't like, then I could give some suggestions on how they can improve it, because that is generally what a beta is for. The most important part of the good section, I think, is it feels like a Treyarch Call of Duty, which is awesome. If you're a fan of Treyarch, that you're going to love this game, I think. Regardless of the strengths and weaknesses, I think you're going to love this game because it genuinely feels like a Treyarch Call of Duty. And as we go through some of the good things, you'll know exactly what I mean. And once you touch it, you'll feel that same way. It actually feels like they had 4 years to cook on this game. It is just impressive on how much polish the game actually has, even in a beta. Because we've had a lot of betas where it's like, damn, half the menus don't work. The TTK feels good and consistent. I think they've done away with a lot of these multipliers that we've kind of become accustomed to with all the Modern Warfare titles, where the headshot, if you land one headshot, you get instantly deleted. For the most part, you're going to have a similar TTK no matter where you're shooting them, besides the distance. And I'm just all for that. I think there are a few different ways as we expand into the creative class. You can speed up the TTK with something like high caliber or rapid fire, but I haven't had enough playtime with those to know whether or not those are truly broken and mess up the TTKs, or they still feel pretty reasonable. I'm sure as time goes on, people will unlock those. They also implemented this auto lean feature. It's not on by default, but you can set it on. And it definitely does feel very immersive as you're coming up to a corner. You're kind of angle on the weapon does its thing. And I think one of the things that they spent the most time on, which is awesome, is this Omni movement system. Super easy to learn, maybe going to be a little bit difficult to master. And I think they've given us tons of settings, so even the most uber casual will be able to learn and incorporate these things into their gameplay. But what's also great is they're not mandatory. Like, you can really just go around and you don't even have to do that. Depending on what weapon you want to use, you can actually just play a little bit different, tactical, so it offers that creative flexibility to play how you want to play the game. If you want to try and go super aggressive with an SMG, it falls more into that category. If you want to go into a rifle, maybe you don't need to do as much Omni movement. And on top of that, the movement isn't incredibly broken. They found that happy point. I feel like the way it feels currently, before people get a chance to maybe figure out how to break it, it feels pretty balanced, where you do get slightly punished if you're just diving around randomly. You got to go and still play Call of Duty like Call of Duty. And this just gives you a little bit more flexibility on how you push and how you play to really enjoy the game. And I think this has been a huge W. And one of the little subtle things they did, which I feel is awesome, especially when it comes to a skill gap and balancing the peripherals between keyboard and mouse and controller, is they actually did a minor modification to aim assist. There's probably multiple things. They said they're going to put out a blog. Matt Schrantz actually replied to my tweet when I was talking about this, where it looks like they've essentially removed aim assist within like point blank range, that 2 to 3 meters, and it'll reduce it for both ADS slowdown and rotational aim assist, which led to a lot of broken mechanics in the game. And I feel like this is great for balancing it. When somebody gets point blank, you're going to definitely have to aim for yourself. And I think this is a great balancing thing, where it's still going to be strong at range and medium range and even up close, but not at point blank range, where the gun would often whip you around when you weren't intentionally trying to whip your aim around. So I think this is a great change. I think the Jackal PDW feels amazing, but it's probably a hair too good. But I would like to see them try buffing some of the other options instead of nerfing this, because this gun definitely feels good. And I think if they nerfed it, it would really feel bad. And we've already kind of had that habit. So I'd love to see them buff some of the other options to kind of compete with the Jackal. And maybe that's the baseline, because it is very good. It feels very strong. And this is with our limited options and limited playtime, where people really haven't had an opportunity to explore, the 17 or so weapons that'll be in the beta. The fact that they've added the nuke in the beta is insanely cool. It's a 30 kill streak. You need actual kills, not this EKIA stuff. And unfortunately, you kind of just have to pay attention to your medals. So hopefully they add some kind of active kill streak count, because I think that's beneficial. If you're like on a 27 kill streak, it'd be nice to know. And hopefully, if there's something in the game that gets added like that we originally had in Modern Warfare 2019 with the little first kill, second kill, third kill. It's just very helpful to kind of pay attention, especially when you get locked in on everything going on. Early maps seem to play fairly well. I think the colors pop. I think sometimes characters can blend in at certain angles, you know, depending on the objective play that you're playing. But for the most part, the maps have a general simple 3-lane map. They feel like Treyarch maps, which is a good thing. I've always been a fan of Treyarch maps in general, and I think it's very intuitive, even in the first time you're playing a map, kind of exactly what is going on, where things are. So I like that aspect to it, where it keeps it pretty simple. I think the created class, even initially, though some of the things are locked because we're only going to get to level 20 and the full game will get to level 55 or whatever in prestige. I think it's very straightforward, pretty streamlined, and there is a little bit of give and take on things where you're going to be able to clearly define the role you want to play. And we've seen a variety of play styles when we're playing. There's a lot of snipers, there's a lot of people camping with their trophy system, and then there's a lot of aggro players. So you kind of have a blend of all those, and no matter what play style you want to play, you can play that, and you're not like at the detriment of the Omni movement or something like that. The default audio sounded pretty good too. There were times where I'm like, oh, I think I hear footsteps. They're not blaringly loud where I can pinpoint with directionality exactly how many feet the people are away from me and what room and what corner. It's not necessarily like that, but I think that it's in a really good balance where we've had other Treyarch games where it makes it so that you could have dead silence on optionally instead of like the crutch perk where it's like, I have to run dead silence or I'm just going to get pre-aimed around every corner. I don't think it's quite that loud, but it's very audible when there is a time where you should be able to hear the footsteps. I think the UI is awesome that you get the option to choose through different options. We've never had that opportunity in Call of Duty. I know there are some limitations with it currently because you could just remove the HUD, make it feel like hardcore. If you don't want to play hardcore and you want a little bit longer TTK, but you want that immersion, you can go that route. I think when you weapon inspect, it removes the HUD, which is kind of cool if you want to look at your camos. If you grind the camos eventually when the game drops, we'll have tons of opportunity with that. So I think that's all pretty good. I think the after action report is also pretty detailed, especially for a beta. I mean, if you've been around for a while, you've played probably a lot of these betas. Sometimes they don't even have some base stats, after action reports bugged and all this other stuff, but it looks to be pretty functional. Eventually, it looks like we'll probably have a combat record, which would be kind of nice. So let's go ahead and get into the bad. It's not a long list because in general, like I started with, it feels like a Treyarch COD. You kind of know what to expect, but I feel like these parts are important to give kind of feedback on, to maybe just give my general perception on the way things are. I think in the beta, the leveling feels a little bit slow. I know we've been kind of accustomed to like 20 levels in the game for a weapon, maybe 25, 17. But some of these weapons have 45, 40-ish levels, 41. And it is taking a little while. I think out of the 3 hours of playtime on using only one gun, I got it to like level 30-ish. And I used some other guns in tandem with it. So it wasn't like it was all dedicated on that, but that feels kind of like a while. Maybe with double XP, you know, you do it 2.5 hours, 3 hours for a gun, which I feel like a casual, that could be pretty long. So I don't know, at least maybe that could get some tuning. They're not going to lower the levels because they're tied to attachments, but maybe we can look into that, especially for the beta, to kind of just feel how that is. Otherwise, people are just going to be kind of using one gun and they're going to stick with that because it takes so long to level. I think the spawns definitely need work. This is a common theme with every beta, but particularly every game that's tied to the IW engine that we originally have. They are under the unified engine, but a lot of stuff carried over where spawns just don't work, and they feel a lot of times like MW 2019 spawns kind of off the bat, even though they've tried to tweak them. I think these will probably get to a good spot because Treyarch generally does a good job in those, but there's so many instances where just the spawns are not great, where you're holding a lane, there's no reason somebody has spawned there, and then you just spawn behind you at an off angle, shoot you in the back, and you see 3 people spawn in the kill cam. And that's not a good feeling. So hopefully they can dial that in. I know common sense is they're going to get that dialed in, but obviously it's a negative at the start. It always is. Next one is connections. And this has been an ongoing issue, I think, for Call of Duty. It's just really weird how there's some kind of packet burst, the latency, because of SBMM or whatever the case is. Obviously, the player pool is pretty small in a closed beta, and it'll be much wider next week and then eventually when the full game comes out, because there's people who pre-order the game, they never touch the beta. They just already know that they're locked in on it. Maybe they don't have time. But I would like to see some improvements in that, at least within the beta. I know they opened more servers. Maybe there was way more people on the game that they expected, so they got a little bit crowded, so there's a little bit of that to expect. But there's also still lobbies disbanding. There was some good games that we had where matches were pretty close, and then it would automatically disband the lobby and we'd have to split up and queue up again. and I'm not really a fan of that. I know they've continued to do that, but it also leads for big swings in your connection where sometimes I might get 12 or 20 ping and other times I might get 35, 40 ping. And even though that's not a huge jump, there's other people that experience way larger jumps. I just happen to be in a very populated area near or just outside of LA. Next little feedback is streaks. I feel like streaks should loop. I do understand that they want to avoid streak spam, and I think they've done a good thing on this. I could have included this in the positive, where if it's tied together, the streaks do seem like they cost quite a bit, like a UAV 675. I feel like normally most CODs it's 500. I understand you get some score for assist and elimination, the EKIAs, but it feels like it takes a little while to get the streaks, which is fine. If they were loopable, at least non-lethal would be loopable. I would love to get my little personal UAV, my UAV, and then a counter UAV, and then I get on another set of streaks. Because at the moment, it's like you go on a 12, 13 streak. If you're playing solo, like I did my entire time, none of your teammates are going to call on a streak. It's just not going to happen. Maybe one every now and then, but not when you need it and not when you're on a streak and you're feeling like you're cooking. It's just not going to happen. So I'd love to see that the same way MW3 did, where they incorporated the loopable streaks into the game and it was balanced. It felt like a game changer and it feels like a traditional Call of Duty that we've had in the past. But this system's currently, as it is, way better than what we had in Cold War with the streaks that just kind of carried over and persisted through death. It was a little bit odd. Also, when it comes to modes, I don't think TDM should be in the beta. I think it plays a little bit whack. People generally, obviously in TDM, you want to play your life, so it just ends up being a little bit camp fest. Versus objective modes seem to play pretty well. And I know they've already kind of laid out what modes they're going to have, but I think there's a lot of people that only play one life modes like S&D, and they'd love to see S&D in the beta, so I think that's a little bit of a feedback. And for perpetuity of betas, there should be S&D in the beta, and TDM just doesn't play well. You're getting people in a mosh pit, I understand that. Hopefully they'll let us choose what we want. I would never play TDM. It hasn't been playable since 2019. The next thing is the animations for throwing things does feel a little bit slow, and you really can't cancel any of them. And for example, if you call in a UAV, you pull out the phone, and then it comes back down. And there's not really a way to why this, even with the skill gap element of that. You're kind of locked into that animation, and I'm not really a fan of that. I think getting locked into animation with the fluidity, omni movement, all these other things that are awesome, I think it's kind of feels bad when you pull out this UAV and then you're kind of in a hip fire. That leads to our next thing, which is the hip fire. The hip spread feels worse than it probably should be. I don't know if they tuned it that way or whatever the case is, but regardless, if you're using a rifle or an SMG, it feels like the spread is probably about 30 to 40% probably wider than it probably should be, just based off feel. Obviously, we can't see any numbers in game yet, but it feels like it's wider than it probably should be. If you're doing something in an animation, you're trying to fire, none of your bullets are going to hit unless you're literally barrel stuffing. So I think that could use a little bit of work. I feel like tactical sprint in the game feels unnecessary. I know that depending on what gun you're using, your gun will do the traditional tactical sprint, and sometimes it'll do the one where your gun goes down. But regardless, it doesn't feel like a huge noticeable difference. And I feel like that's something that, like Treyarch CODs don't need tactical sprint. We didn't have them ever in any other Treyarch COD. I understand they're probably going to just keep it because it's a unified engine, but I feel like it's completely unnecessary. And that's generally my first impressions. That's probably my shortest bad list when it comes to a beta. We've had plenty of long ones in the past, but let me know what your guys' thoughts are down in the comment section. If you guys are interested in a settings video, let me know as well. Appreciate your support. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.